In the beginning, the people of Israel had settled in the land of Egypt many generations after Joseph, the Hebrew who had once saved Egypt from famine. Joseph, a man favored by God, had risen to a position of great power in Egypt, and through his wisdom and faithfulness, his family was welcomed and given land among the Egyptians. For a time, the Israelites prospered in Egypt, living peacefully and with respect. But as the years passed, a new Pharaoh arose who did not remember Joseph or the kindness shown to his ancestors. This new king looked upon the growing Hebrew population with suspicion and fear. The Hebrews had multiplied greatly, and their numbers made the Egyptians uneasy. Fearing that they might join Egypt's enemies in times of war or rebellion, the Pharaoh decided to take drastic measures. He enslaved the Israelites, forcing them into hard labor. They were made to build cities and storehouses, their lives made bitter with toil and suffering. Yet, despite their bondage, the Israelites continued to grow in number, fulfilling God's promise to Abraham that his descendants would become a great nation. The Egyptian king, in his fear, issued a cruel decree to control the Hebrew population. He commanded the Hebrew midwives to kill every male child born to the Israelites. But the midwives feared God more than Pharaoh and refused to obey his evil command. When questioned, they told Pharaoh that Hebrew women gave birth before they arrived, thus saving many boys from death. Enraged, Pharaoh then ordered that all Hebrew male infants be thrown into the Nile River. This was a time of great sorrow among the Hebrew women, as mothers watched their sons taken from them and cast into the waters. But one mother, of the tribe of Levi, refused to give up her child. She hid her baby for 3 months, but as he grew, it became impossible to conceal him. Filled with desperate love and faith, she made a basket of bulrushes, waterproofed it with tar and pitch, and placed her infant inside. She set the basket adrift on the Nile, trusting in God's mercy. Her daughter, the baby's sister, watched from afar as the basket floated along the riverbank. By God's divine plan, the basket was carried to the place where Pharaoh's daughter was bathing. She saw the crying infant and, moved with compassion, decided to take him into her care. Despite knowing he was a Hebrew, she named him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water, and adopted him as her own son. Pharaoh's daughter provided him with royal clothing, education, and privilege, and Moses grew up among the Egyptian nobility, unaware of his true heritage. As Moses matured, he saw the suffering of his Hebrew kin and was troubled by the injustice he witnessed. One day, he saw an Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave severely. Filled with righteous anger, Moses intervened and struck down the Egyptian, killing him. When the deed was discovered, Pharaoh sought to punish Moses, forcing him to flee Egypt to escape death. Moses fled to the land of Midian, where he became a shepherd tending flocks near Mount Horeb. There he married Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, and they had a son named Gershom. Moses lived quietly for many years, believing his life was now hidden from the turmoil of Egypt. But God's plans for him were not yet fulfilled. One day, while tending his flock, Moses saw a strange sight, a bush that was burning but not consumed. Curious, he approached it, and suddenly he heard the voice of God calling him from the flames. "Moses, Moses," said the voice. Trembling, Moses replied, "Here am I." God revealed himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and told Moses that he had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt. God declared that he would deliver the Israelites from bondage and bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey. God commissioned Moses to go to Pharaoh and demand the freedom of the Israelites. But Moses was hesitant. He questioned, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" God reassured him, "I will be with you." To demonstrate his power, God performed miracles for Moses. He turned Moses' staff into a serpent, and when Moses stretched it out again, it became a staff once more. But Moses expressed doubt, saying, "Suppose they do not believe me or listen to my voice." God provided signs to prove his authority. He turned Moses' hand leprous and then healed it, and turned water from the river into blood. Yet Moses still hesitated, citing his lack of eloquence. God responded, "Who has made man's mouth? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say." He also sent Moses' brother Aaron to be his spokesman and helper. With God's reassurance, Moses returned to Egypt. Accompanied by Aaron, Moses boldly approached Pharaoh and declared, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh refused, and instead, he increased the Israelites' burdens, demanding they produce the same amount of bricks without the straw that had been supplied before. The Israelites suffered even more under this cruel oppression. Moses, grieved by their suffering, went back to Pharaoh and warned him of the consequences of his stubbornness. God then sent a series of judgments upon Egypt, known as the 10 plagues, to persuade Pharaoh to release his people. The first was turned water into blood, making the Nile and all waters in Egypt undrinkable. Despite this, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he refused to let the Israelites go. Next came an invasion of frogs that covered the land, entering houses and filling the palace. When Pharaoh begged Moses to remove the frogs, he did so, but once they died, the stench was overwhelming, and Pharaoh once again refused to relent. God sent gnats or lice that infested Egypt, a plague that the magicians acknowledged was the finger of God, yet Pharaoh still refused. Then came swarms of flies that filled the land, except in the territory of Goshen, where the Israelites dwelled. Despite the discomfort, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. God struck the Egyptian livestock with a severe disease that killed many animals, and painful boils broke out on the Egyptians and their servants. The Pharaoh's stubbornness persisted. God then sent a mighty hailstorm, destroying crops and trees. After the hail, locusts swarmed over Egypt, consuming whatever was left of the harvest. The Pharaoh's officials begged him to let the people go, but he refused, and the destruction deepened. Finally, darkness covered Egypt for 3 days, a thick darkness that could be felt, but the Israelites had light in their dwellings. The last and most devastating plague was yet to come. God warned Moses that he would strike down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the lowest servant, and even the firstborn of the animals. To protect their households, the Israelites were commanded to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood. The blood would serve as a sign for the angel of death to pass over their homes, sparing their firstborns. That night, at midnight, the angel of death swept through Egypt, killing every firstborn child and animal that was not marked by the blood. Great mourning filled the land as Pharaoh's own son was found dead. Overcome with grief and realizing that God's judgment was upon him, Pharaoh finally relented. He summoned Moses and the Israelites and commanded them to leave Egypt immediately. After 430 years of slavery, God's people were finally free. The Israelites took their possessions and set out on their journey toward the Promised Land. They traveled through the wilderness, guided by God's cloud by day and fire by night. But soon, Pharaoh changed his mind. His heart hardened once again, and he sent his army after the fleeing Hebrews to bring them back. As the Israelites reached the Red Sea, they faced a seemingly impossible obstacle. The Egyptian army was in pursuit, and the people were terrified. Some cried out in despair, wishing they had remained slaves in Egypt. They blamed Moses, questioning why he had led them into such peril. But Moses encouraged the people, saying, "Fear not. Stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today." God commanded Moses to stretch out his rod over the sea. As he did, the waters parted, creating a dry path through the sea. The Israelites crossed safely to the other side, walking between towering walls of water. When the last of God's people had crossed, God caused the waters to return, drowning the Egyptian chariots and soldiers who pursued them. The Israelites watched in awe as their enemies were overwhelmed by the sea. The people then sang a song of praise to God, celebrating their deliverance. Moses led them into the wilderness, where they journeyed toward Mount Sinai. For days, they traveled without water, and some began to grumble, fearing they would perish in the desert. But God provided for their needs. Moses struck a rock at Horeb, and water flowed out for the people to drink. He also sent quail from heaven to feed them, and manna, a heavenly bread, rained down from the sky each morning. At Mount Sinai, Moses ascended the mountain alone, where he entered into communion with God. The Lord revealed himself in a glorious display of fire and smoke, and he gave Moses a set of divine laws known as the 10 Commandments. These commandments were inscribed on 2 stone tablets and were to serve as the moral foundation for God's people. The commandments included commands to worship only the one true God, to honor parents, to refrain from murder, adultery, stealing, false witness, and coveting. They established principles for living in harmony with God and one another. The people were instructed to keep the Sabbath day holy and to obey these laws as part of their covenant with God. While Moses was on the mountain, the people below grew restless. They feared Moses would never return, and in their impatience, they pressured Aaron to make them a god to worship. Aaron, giving in to their demands, took gold earrings from the women and fashioned a golden calf. The people celebrated their new idol with feasts and sacrifices, forsaking the true God who had delivered them. God was angered by their rebellion. When Moses descended and saw the golden calf, he was filled with grief and righteous anger. He smashed the tablets of the law, and with a stern voice, he confronted the people. He called for those who remained faithful to God to come to him. The tribe of Levi responded, and Moses commanded them to execute those who had turned to idol worship. About 3,000 people were slain that day. Moses interceded for the people, pleading with God to forgive their sins. God showed mercy and commanded Moses to make new tablets of stone, which he inscribed with the second set of commandments. He renewed his covenant with Israel, promising to be their God if they would obey his laws. As the Israelites continued their journey, they faced many challenges and trials. Their journey lasted 40 years in the wilderness. Through it all, God provided for them manna from heaven, water from rocks, guidance through the cloud and fire, and protection from enemies. Moses led them faithfully, reminding them of God's promises and commandments. Finally, after years of wandering, they arrived at the borders of the Promised Land. Moses gathered the people and prepared them for entering Canaan. But God told Moses that he himself would not enter the land due to an earlier act of disobedience. Instead, Moses ascended Mount Nebo, from where he saw the land that God had promised to give to Israel. There, Moses died in the land of Moab, and God himself buried him in an unknown valley. The Israelites mourned for Moses, their great leader and prophet. His life was a testament to faith, obedience, and God's unwavering love. His story reminds us that God's plans are perfect, and his promises are sure. The journey of Moses and the Israelites from slavery to freedom, from rebellion to obedience, is a powerful story of God's mercy and faithfulness. It teaches us that even in our darkest moments, God's light can lead us out of darkness. It encourages us to trust in God's plan and to follow his commandments, for they are the path to life and blessing. As we reflect on Moses' life, remember that God calls each of us to be part of his divine story. Like Moses, we are invited to trust God's strength, obey his word, and lead others toward his truth. Let us be inspired by his courage and faith, and strive to live according to God's commandments. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Moses and the Great Exodus. If this story has touched your heart, please like, comment below, and share this video with friends and family. Subscribe to our channel for more biblical stories and teachings. Together, let us grow in faith and spread the message of God's everlasting love. May God bless you abundantly and guide you in his truth. See you in the next episode of Bible Stories.